Hello and welcome to all of you who are joining us on our live streaming session of St Mary's Church of Ireland in Killarney Christian Meditation Group. Also a heartfelt welcome to those who are following on our catch-up recording on our YouTube channel. You're most welcome wherever and whenever you are. So we will commence our meditation in the usual way, and when we close our eyes and relax the muscles of our body to prepare, at the sound of the gong we will bring the sacred word, the mantra Maranatha, into our minds, and the meditation will last for 30 minutes, and at the end, following the sound of the gong, we keep our eyes closed for a while as we bring ourselves back to a level of alertness and bring the body back from its relaxation. And then at the sound of the final gong, we slowly open our eyes. And then we will follow with a short reflection upon the practice of meditation. So let us now close our eyes and relax our body. Hi, I hope your meditation was a nice and pleasant experience for you. I'm going to reflect on something this evening which extends in a sense the subject we were looking at a while ago, the idea of a spectrum. Oh, excuse me. The idea of a spectrum and the relationship it had to value was what we were thinking about before. Now, this time the imagery from nature that I want to dwell upon is the idea of an inversion. An inversion. This is the kind of thing that you find in a mirage or a weather condition where in the weather where the warm air sits above the cold air and the cold air has nowhere to go, and so it starts to create strange effects. It's called an inversion layer, and an inversion layer or point is something particularly present within nature in a variety of ways. But basically, to get the idea of it, think of numbers. Take the number 1 and put it above the number 2. Then you've got a half. Or above the number 3 and you've got a third. Or above the number 4 and you've got a quarter. Each of these numbers underneath the 1 is actually increasing steadily, incrementally. But the whole fraction itself, a half, a third, a quarter, a fifth, a sixth, etc., is changing in a non-linear way. It's changing in a way that we call exponential. So if you look at that and you look at the number 1 itself and then go to the other side of the number 1, where you start to get a strange inversion. Put a tenth under 1, okay, and you get 10. Put a hundredth under 1 and you get 100. Put a thousandth under 1 and you get 1,000. So you can see here the idea of an inversion. At an inversion point you get the opposite one side to the other. The opposite in the sense of it's upside down. It's not opposite in a sense of value, but opposite in a sense of its behaviour, the way it functions. And the exponential curve, which we've heard a lot about in the current pandemic, is that kind of thing. And the number 1 itself is the inversion point. So how does this apply then to our practice of meditation? Well, I want you to think for a moment and ask yourself the question, how does your ego behave when it is under constraint, when it has to follow rules or it is hindered in some way? And contrast that with the way your ego behaves when it has freedom. So just think about that for a short while and imagine your experiences of the two kinds. You may have imagined on the one hand that when your ego is constrained, it is rebelling against that constraint, and its focus is entirely on yourself and on your desire not to be held down or held back or constrained in any way. And then you might have been thinking about the other circumstances where your ego has a freedom to act and to behave. And it's possible that sometimes in those circumstances, our ego decides that it is given free rein to do whatever it wishes in terms of drawing attention to ourselves or in some other way being the focus of our life and our surroundings. So you have to ask yourself the question then, what is the difference between these two conditions? Well, when we look at this in terms of our meditation practice, of our desire to come closer to God and to be changed by that proximity, that presence to God, when we consider these two aspects in that context, then we find an inversion. When we are, in a sense, constrained by circumstances and by life, then we have that natural tendency to want to rebel against it and to accrue to ourselves freedoms to do as we wish. And that is the normal and natural state of our ego in the human condition. So that is on one side of the meditation experience. But on the other side of the meditation experience, across the inversion point, the ego behaves very differently to what we might just have been thinking about. Because in that inversion point, the ego switches its mode of operation. And in the other side of our meditation practice, that is to say, when we are close and proximate with God, there is a sense in which our ego is given the freedom which would have been its place in the beginning of humanity, if you will, the kind of Garden of Eden imagery. And in that condition, what the ego does is it uses the freedom to benefit the world around it rather than to benefit oneself. It uses the freedom actually not to focus on itself, but to focus on others. And this is an inversion of its behavior. If you were thinking about these things earlier, you would have thought the ego drawing things to itself because it had the freedom to do whatever it wanted. But through our meditation practice, the ego switches that, it inverts it, and it then behaves in a altruistic and magnanimous, a humble sort of way. And that's the effect of an inversion. So our coming closer to God brings us from our human condition, our fallen condition, into the condition of grace, into the condition of blessed relationship with God. And so we know the difference between the two. When we are engaged in our meditation practice, and that has an effect upon our daily lives, we can tell the difference because we are more able to think of others before ourselves and to do things which, true, they bring benefit to us, but actually they are focused on other people and other circumstances and other situations first and foremost. And it is in a sense by accident that we ourselves benefit from those actions. So you can see here, this is the ego that's doing all of this. But through the spiritual dynamic of that inversion, which we experience through the meditation practice, through prayer and through engaging with God, we find that the ego switches to its original condition, its original state. So in a sense, it's not the spiritual state which is inverted, but it's our current state of freedom, if you will, that is the inverted bit, is the upside down bit, is the bit that's the wrong way round. And that means that the ego itself is actually an instrument for good, but we have inadvertently or mistakenly taken it to be a selfish instrument, because that's how it appears to us in our everyday living outside of the godly state of grace. So from that point then, let us approach the coming days with this idea of the inversion point that our meditation practice has brought us to, and let us see how we may live our lives in the original state of the ego, which is to say, caring for others first and not for ourselves. So I wish you the best, and God bless you all, and thank you for joining us for this live streaming and catch-up session of the Christian Meditation Prayer Group here in St Mary's Church in Killarney. God bless you. Bye-bye.